The frost cracked under her boots like tiny bones. Each step toward the barn echoed in the brittle silence of a Michigan February morning. Hay dust hung frozen in the weak light slanting through the high windows, smelling of summer decay trapped in winter's fist. Wind whistled through a gap in the siding, a mournful tune in the empty stable. What do you do when the only thing left of someone you loved is a horse they left behind? The question wasn't asked aloud. It lived in the hollow ache behind her ribs, in the way her gloved fingers trembled slightly on the cold metal latch. Ellie didn't look at the other stalls. Empty eyesores. Her gaze went straight to the last one on the right. Where he was. She wasn't ready. Not for this. Not for the weight of him, the smell of him, the sheer, terrifying life of him that felt like a reproach to her own numbness. Her father had loved Appaloosas. Loved this one, a gangly spotted yearling named Patches back then, bought on a whim at a county fair. Then the cancer ate him, swift and brutal, leaving debts and silence and this creature, her inheritance. A punchline to a cruel joke. The auction flyer had called him Lot 47, kill pen, meat price. Nobody wanted a nervous, half-trained horse with a history no one knew and scars that hinted at worse. Except Ellie. She'd emptied her meager savings, the college fund already bled dry by hospital bills. Bet everything on a ghost. The air inside. His stall was thick, warmer, smelling of ammonia, damp straw, and something wilder. Musk. Fear. He was pressed into the far corner, a living shadow against the rough wood. Not small anymore. Tall, lean muscle under a thick winter coat matted with old mud. His spots weren't cute dots. They were stark ink blots on dirty snow, a chaotic map across his rump, shoulders, neck. One eye, wide and rolling white, watched her. The other was clouded. A milky blue-white film over what should have been dark brown. It gave him a look of perpetual, unsettling surprise. Or accusation. His ribs showed, just slightly, beneath the shaggy coat. He didn't move, didn't snort, just stood frozen, breathing shallow puffs of vapor into the frigid air. His ears, sharp and mobile, were pinned flat back against his skull. Not anger, terror. Pure, distilled terror held him rigid. Ellie leaned her forehead against the cold metal bars, the chill biting through her knit hat. Her breath hitched, not from the cold. She'd seen pictures of him as a colt, nudging her, Dad's shoulder, liquid brown eyes trusting. This wasn't that horse. This was a creature carved from nightmares and neglect. What had she done? Her throat tightened. The money was gone. He was here, and she had no idea how to bridge the chasm between this trembling, ruined animal and the echoing void inside herself. She fumbled in her pocket, pulled out a single, slightly bruised apple. Her offering, her apology, her plea. She slid the bolt slowly, the scrape of metal loud in the hush. He flinched violently, a full-body shudder rippling through him, his hooves scuffing the packed earth. Ellie froze. Waited. The seconds stretched, thin and sharp. His good eye stayed locked on her, the clouded one staring blindly past her shoulder. His nostrils flared wide, sucking in her scent. Wool, frost, grief, apple. Slowly, painfully slowly, his ears twitched, rotated forward a fraction. Not relaxed, alert, assessing the threat holding the fruit. She didn't step inside, just extended, her arm slowly palm flat, the apple resting on it. Her hand shook. She willed it still. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with the frantic drumbeat of his heart, she imagined, and the thudding of her own. His head lowered an inch, sniffed the air again. A soft, questioning puff escaped his nostrils, warming the skin of her wrist where her glove ended. He took one hesitant step away from the wall, then another. His neck stretched out long and wary. His whiskers brushed her knuckles. It was the lightest touch, like cobwebs. He flinched back instantly, head snapping up, ears flat again, whites showing around his good eye. Ellie didn't move, didn't breathe, just held the apple, an island of potential sweetness in the cold, sour gloom. He watched her. The rigid terror in his stance softened fractionally into a watchful tension. He stretched his neck again, slower this time. His lips, soft and surprisingly velvety, brushed her palm. Hesitant. Exploring. They trembled against her skin. Then, with a speed that startled her, he lipped the apple from her hand and retreated swiftly back to his corner, crunching it loudly, juice dripping onto the straw. He kept his good eye on her the whole time, guarded, wary, but he'd taken it. He hadn't bolted. He hadn't tried to bite. A sound escaped Ellie. Not a sob, not a laugh, something raw and in between. She sank slowly onto her haunches just inside the stall door, pulling her knees to her chest, resting her chin on them. She watched him eat. The frantic crunching slowed. His ears, still mostly back, flickered occasionally. The rigid line of his back softened just a little. He finished the apple, licked his lips, and then he sighed, a deep, shuddering exhalation that fogged the air between them. His head lowered, not all the way, but the defensive arch in his neck eased. He stood, not relaxed, but no longer braced, for flight. His clouded eyes seemed to gaze at nothing. The good one stayed on her. Not with fear now, with a quiet, exhausted watchfulness, an acknowledgement. Minutes bled away in the cold stall. The wind still moaned outside. Ellie's toes were numb. Her heart felt bruised, but strangely less hollow. She hadn't touched him, hadn't tried to soothe him with words that felt like ash in her mouth. She'd just been there, offered an apple, and he hadn't shattered. Slowly, stiffly, she pushed herself up. Time to go. The feed still needed mucking, water buckets filled. The reality of the burden she'd shouldered pressed down again. She turned, pulling the heavy stall door closed behind her, the latch clicking into place with finality. She took 3 steps down the concrete aisle, the frost cracking again under her boots. Then she stopped. A soft, rhythmic sound followed. Not footsteps. A quiet, persistent puffing. She turned. He was there, right at the bars of his stall. His nose pressed against the cold metal, his good eye fixed on her retreating back. His breath plumed in short, visible bursts into the aisle air. He didn't call out, didn't paw, just stood, watching her leave, as if waiting for her to come back. As if, in the quiet aftermath of an apple and shared stillness, something fragile and unnameable had shifted in the frozen air between them. Ellie stared back, the question hanging unspoken, heavy as the winter sky. Why? Why follow me with your eyes when all I represent is another ending? She didn't know why. But the weight of his silent gaze, that single storm cloud eye holding hers, anchored her to the spot long after the cold should have driven her inside. He didn't look away. Neither did she. The barn held its breath. The fragile truce of winter thawed into a muddy, hesitant spring. Ellie worked. That was the anchor. Muck stalls, haul hay, fill buckets until her shoulders screamed. The Appaloosa, she still couldn't call him Patches. The name felt like borrowed clothes. Watched. Always watched. His good eye tracked. Her every move from the shadows of his stall. A wary sentinel. The clouded one remained a pale, unreadable moon. He stopped flinching when she slid the bolt. He'd even take an apple from her palm without retreating. His lips soft and careful. The crunch echoing in the quiet barn. He let her curry the thick winter coat shedding from his spotted rump, standing rigid, breath held, only the faintest tremor under her hands betraying his tension. Progress, measured in inches, and held breaths. Yet the chasm remained. He never nickered, never sought her touch. He was a ghost inhabiting a horse's body, present but profoundly absent. Then came the words. Ellie talked to fill the silence, rambling monologues about the price of grain, the stubborn tractor, the relentless ache of missing her dad. One damp April morning, wrestling with a bale, her voice thick with exhaustion, she muttered, Ben wouldn't have let that rust bucket die on him. Just his name. Ben. A sharp thud against wood. She froze. The horse had kicked his stall door. Not a frantic panic kick, but a single, solid thump. Like a fist on a table. His head was high, ears pricked rigidly forward, nostrils flared wide. His good eye wasn't on her. It was fixed, intensely, on the empty space where her voice had hung. The clouded eye seemed to strain towards it too. Silence crashed back, heavier than before. Ellie's heart hammered against her ribs. Coincidence? A fly? But there were no flies yet. She swallowed. Dad? He loved this place. She ventured, her voice barely a whisper. The horse shifted his weight. A low, almost inaudible, rumble vibrated in his chest. Not a growl, not a nicker. Something else. Something deep and resonant like stones shifting underground. Ellie felt it in her own bones. It became a terrifying ritual. Mention Ben, mention her father, even obliquely, and the horse reacted. A head snap, a sudden intense focus on her face, that low subterranean rumble. Once, when she described her father's laugh, a sound she hadn't heard in 2 years, the Appaloosa stretched his neck towards her across the stall door and snuffed loudly, deliberately, at the air near her cheek. It wasn't affection, it was recognition, searching. It scared her. This horse was a vessel carrying echoes she wasn't sure she could bear to hear. She started avoiding talking about her dad near him. The silence grew colder, thicker than the winter frost. The horse watched her with renewed intensity, a question burning in his one good eye she couldn't answer. The fragile trust began to fray. He started refusing the apple some days, turning his spotted hindquarters towards her, a wall of muscle and bone. One afternoon, wrestling with a rotten board on the paddock fence, frustration boiled over. "Damn it, Ben!" she yelled at the unyielding. Wood, the name ripped raw from her throat. "Why'd you leave me this?" It wasn't just the fence. It was the debt, the loneliness, the terrifying responsibility of this broken animal echoing her own brokenness, the sheer overwhelming unfairness of it all. Behind her, the Appaloosa erupted, not in fear but in a frenzy of noise. A shrill, piercing whinny tore from him, unlike any sound she'd heard before, high, desperate, ragged. He charged the yaw fence line of his small paddock, kicking out, bucking, spinning in tight, furious circles, spraying mud. His good eye rolled white. The clouded one seemed to blaze with an internal storm. He wasn't just agitated. He was answering her scream with one of his own. Ellie stumbled back, heart in her mouth. "Whoa, easy, easy, boy." Her voice shook. He ignored her, trapped in his own vortex of sound and movement, a spotted dervish of pent-up. What? Grief? Rage? Memory? Driven by a panic she didn't understand, Ellie ran. Not away from the horse, but towards the old barn, towards the last place she knew her father had been truly happy. The small tack room. She shoved the creaking door open, the smell of old leather and dust thick in the air. Sunlight slanted through a dirty window, illuminating motes dancing over discarded bridles and cracked saddles. She sank onto a dusty trunk, the fight draining out of her, replaced by a wave of grief so potent it stole her breath. Sobs tore through her, harsh and ugly in the quiet room. She buried her face in her hands, shoulders shaking, the weight of missing her father, the burden of the horse, the sheer exhaustion of holding it all together finally crushing her. "I can't," she gasped into the dusty silence. "Dad, I just can't do this alone." The sound was soft, a gentle clop on the wooden floor just outside the tack room door. Then a quiet puff of breath. Ellie froze, her sobs catching in her throat. Slowly, she lifted her tear-streaked face. He stood in the doorway. The Appaloosa. Mud streaked his legs. His sides still heaved slightly from his paddock frenzy. His head was low, not submissive, present. His good eye was fixed on her, dark and deep. The clouded one reflected the dusty sunlight, He took one slow, deliberate step into the small room. Then another. The space was cramped for him, his spotted shoulders nearly brushing the walls. He stopped barely an arm's length from where she sat crumpled on the trunk. He didn't nuzzle her, didn't wick her. He simply stood. His massive head lowered slightly, his warm breath, smelling of hay and earth, stirred the hair near her temple. He breathed. Deep, slow, measured, in and out, and in and out. A steady, grounding rhythm against the frantic staccato of her own panicked gasps. His presence was immense, filling the small room, not threatening, but solid. An anchor. Minutes passed. Ellie's ragged breathing began to sink unconsciously with his deep, slow inhalations. The storm of tears subsided, leaving her hollowed out, trembling. She leaned forward, resting her forehead tentatively against the solid warmth of his neck. He didn't flinch, didn't move away. He stood firm. His warmth seeped into her chilled skin. The steady rise and fall of his ribs beneath her cheek was the only sound in the world. He breathed, and she breathed with him. He stayed. Long after her trembling stopped. Long after the last tear dried on her cheek. He simply stood, a silent, spotted pillar holding up her shattered sky. Summer arrived, thick and green and humming, with cicadas. The transformation wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, like moss growing over stone. Ellie still worked, but her shoulders didn't hunch so much. She hummed sometimes, tunelessly, while filling water buckets. The Appaloosa, she'd started calling him Ghost for the way he moved silently and the specter he carried, began to meet her at the paddock gate. Not eagerly, but with a deliberate walk, his good eye finding hers. He'd lower his head, for the halter accepting the touch. The frantic edge in his movements had smoothed. He grazed peacefully in the sun. His clouded eye turned towards the light, no longer seeming blind, but simply seeing differently. One golden September afternoon, Ellie led Ghost not to the paddock, but to the overgrown ring behind the barn. Her father's old roping saddle, meticulously cleaned and oiled, rested on the fence rail. Ghost eyed it, nostrils flaring, but stood steady as Ellie lifted it onto his back, her hands gentle, murmuring reassurances that felt natural now, not forced. He tensed slightly as she tightened the cinch, but held his ground, letting out a soft sigh. She gathered the reins, took a breath that filled her lungs with the scent of warm horse and dry grass, and put her foot in the stirrup. Ghost shifted his weight, anticipating. She swung her leg over, settling into the worn leather. For a heartbeat, they both stood utterly still. Ellie perched on the back of this creature who was once a ghost of pain. Ghost, ears flicking back towards her, then forward, waiting. Ellie nudged him gently with her heels. He stepped forward, then again. A walk, tentative, rhythmic. The motion was familiar, a memory unlocked not just in her mind, but in her muscles. Around the ring they went, the only sounds the crunch of hooves on dirt, the creak of leather, the sigh of the wind, in the oaks. No pressure, no demands, just moving together under the wide, forgiving sky. Halfway around, Ghost's ears pricked forward. He gave a soft, contented snort. Ellie felt a smile bloom on her face, genuine and light, the first in a long, long time. It wasn't about roping or winning. It was about the simple, profound act of moving forward. Later, unsaddling him in the quiet barn, smoothing the sweat-darkened spots on his back, Ghost turned his head. He nudged her shoulder. Not for an apple. Just a soft, deliberate press of his velvety muzzle against her. A silent affirmation. Ellie rested her hand on his neck, feeling the powerful muscle beneath, the steady beat of his life. As she led him, back to his stall, clean and content, he paused. Not at his door, but at the one next to it. The stall that had been empty since her father passed. Ghost stretched his neck over the lower half door, snuffling deeply at the old wood. He nudged, a particular spot low down on the inside wall, A spot Ellie had passed 1,000 times without seeing. Curious, she slid the bolt and stepped inside the dusty space. Kneeling where Ghost had nudged, she brushed away years of grime and cobwebs from the rough pine plank. Carved into the wood, not with a knife but perhaps with a hoof nail, worn smooth by time and touch, were 2 words. Ben's heart. Ellie traced the letters with a trembling finger. Not Patches, not Lot 47. Ben's heart. Her father's secret name for the spotted yearling he'd loved. The name etched here, a hidden declaration, waiting. Ghost stood at the stall door, his good eye watching her, the clouded one reflecting, the late sun slanting through the high window. He blew softly, a warm puff of air against her arm. The pieces clicked, not just the horse recognizing a name, but recognizing his name. The name only Ben used, the name tied to safety, to belonging. Ghost hadn't just carried her grief, he'd carried the echo of her father's love, a love that had named him, cherished him, and then, through cruel circumstance, abandoned him to darkness. He'd reacted to Ben because it was the sound of home. He'd followed her scream because it was the sound of shared loss. He'd stood in the tack room because he knew the shape of a breaking heart. He'd led her here, to this hidden truth. Ellie leaned her forehead against Ghost's strong neck, right over the powerful beat of his heart. Ben's heart. Still beating. Scarred, clouded in places, but undeniably alive. She hadn't inherited a burden. She'd been given a guardian, a living bridge back to the love she thought was lost. The horse nobody wanted hadn't just been saved. He'd done the saving. The tears that came now were warm, quiet, a release not of pain, but of a gratitude so vast it felt like wings. She looked into Ghost's good eye, seeing not wariness now, but a quiet, deep knowing. In the clouded one, she no longer saw blindness. She saw the reflection of a weathered, enduring love, still shining through the storm. He nudged her again, gentle, insistent. Sometimes the ones who carry you are the ones no one else saw coming. If this story of a broken girl and a scarred horse finding their way home touched something in you, smash that subscribe button. Deep. Dive into the comments. Tell us about a creature who carried you. Ring the bell so you never miss a story that might just mend a piece of your own heart. Share this with someone who needs reminding that hope often arrives spotted, scarred, and smelling of hay. We'll see you tomorrow for the next soul-deep journey.